Single mom finds abandoned girl at bus stop in winter. But she was the daughter of a billionaire, and upon discovery, she does something that shocks everyone. Rate my story from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and subscribe to my channel to support my work. I'm counting on your help. The biting wind of the early morning cut through the single mum's bones as she adjusted her thin coat and looked through the fogged-up bus window. Her calloused fingers gripped the worn purse that held the last few dollars of the month, barely enough for the return fare from her third job. Exhaustion weighed on her shoulders like an invisible burden she had carried for years, ever since she found herself alone raising her 4-year-old son, who was sleeping soundly in their small rented apartment in the suburbs of Chicago. The bus stop was almost empty at that hour, with only a few people huddled under the dim, flickering streetlight. That's when her eyes caught something that made her heart leap. Curled up against the cold metal bench, a tiny girl shivered in a coat that seemed 3 times too big for her fragile little body. The child couldn't have been more than 4 years old, but her extreme thinness made her seem even smaller, like a wounded sparrow abandoned in the cold. The single mum felt something stir in her chest, a maternal instinct she couldn't ignore, even though she barely had enough to support her own child. She approached slowly, crouching in front of the girl, who looked up with frightened sky-blue eyes. "Are you all alone, sweetie?" she murmured softly, extending her hand carefully. The child didn't answer, just huddled smaller, but she didn't recoil when the woman took off her own coat and wrapped it around her with care. Without a second thought, she picked up the girl, feeling how she weighed almost nothing, and took her home. In the months that followed, the little girl naturally integrated into the humble family's routine. She played with the boy as if they were blood siblings, shared the simple but lovingly prepared meals, and slowly began to speak in a soft little voice that melted the single mum's heart. For 6 long months, the woman tirelessly tried to find any relatives of the child, calling all the social services in the sprawling metropolis of Chicago, filling out forms and waiting for responses that never came. Money became even tighter with another mouth to feed, but somehow she always managed. She worked the graveyard shift cleaning offices, then rushed to her second job at a diner, and in the afternoons, she still cleaned houses in the affluent neighborhood of Evanston. Her hands cracked from the excessive use of cleaning products. Her back ached from bending over buckets and mops, but seeing the 2 children playing happily in their small apartment made all the suffering worthwhile. It was on a rainy Thursday that the phone finally rang. A social worker on the other end of the line spoke automatically, as if reading a report. "Ma'am, we've found information about the child in your care. Her father is a well-known businessman in the city. He's offering a considerable reward for any information." The single mum's heart froze. During all these months, she had become attached to the girl, as if she were her own daughter. The thought of losing her now seemed unbearable, but she knew she had no right to deprive a child of her real family. The next day, a shiny black car pulled up in front of the small building where she lived. The man who got out of the vehicle seemed to belong to a completely different world from hers. Tall, elegant, dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her entire year's salary. His dark hair was perfectly styled, and even from a distance, it was possible to perceive the aura of power and wealth that surrounded him. When he climbed the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment, the tension in the air was almost palpable. The single mom opened the door with trembling hands, watching as his eyes quickly scanned the modest but impeccably clean environment. Old but well-maintained furniture, walls that needed a new coat of paint, simple curtains she had sewn herself. "Is the girl here?" he asked, in a deep, controlled voice. But there was something in his eyes that betrayed a storm of contained emotions. Before she could answer, the child came running from the living room, stopped when she saw the stranger, and hid behind the legs of the woman who had cared for her all these months. The man stood motionless, as if he had seen a ghost. His hands trembled almost imperceptibly before he crouched down slowly. "Honey," he murmured, and the voice that had previously sounded firm was now choked with emotion. The girl stared at him for long seconds before running towards him, throwing her little arms around her father's neck. He lifted her as if she were made of crystal, squeezing her against his chest, while silent tears streamed down his face. The single mom watched the scene with a heavy heart, happy for the reunion, but already feeling the emptiness that was forming in her chest. The silence that followed the reunion was broken only by the child's muffled sobs, as she clung to her father's neck as if she feared he might disappear again. The millionaire stood up slowly, still holding his daughter, and his eyes met those of the single mom. There was a deep gratitude there, but also something more complex that she couldn't decipher. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice still trembling with emotion. "During all these months, I searched for her in every corner of this city. I hired the best detectives, offered rewards, mobilized all my resources." The woman lowered her eyes, suddenly aware of her simple appearance in front of this man who exuded prosperity from every pore. Her worn clothes, her rough hands marked by hard work, the small and modest apartment, everything seemed even humbler in his presence. "She's a special child," she murmured, watching as the girl finally calmed down in her father's arms. It was then that the man took an envelope from the inside pocket of his jacket, extending it towards her. "Please, accept this. It's just a small token of my gratitude. I know that caring for 2 children on your own must have been a huge sacrifice." The single mum looked at the envelope without touching it, feeling something churning in her stomach. Slowly, she shook her head. "I can't accept it. I took care of her because she needed care, not expecting anything in return." The businessman was visibly surprised. In his world of business and calculated relationships, he was used to solving everything with money. Her refusal left him speechless for a few seconds. "But Mom, the amount I'm offering could change your life. You could move out of this place, give your son a better education." "This place is my home," she replied with dignity, raising her chin. "And my son is being educated with values that money can't buy." Something changed in the millionaire's expression. For the first time in years, he found himself facing someone who couldn't be bought, who didn't bow down to his wealth. It was both frustrating and fascinating. In the days that followed, something unexpected began to happen. The man came back, not once, but several times, always with seemingly rational excuses, to check how his daughter was adapting, to thank her again for her care, to bring some toys for the children. But the single mom began to realize that there was something more behind those visits. She watched how he became fascinated watching the children play in the small apartment, how his eyes softened when she sang to them before bedtime, how he seemed genuinely interested in the simple stories of everyday life. The man who ran a chain of luxury hotels, who made multi-million-dollar decisions daily, seemed to find peace in that humble environment. "My daughter has never smiled so much," he confessed one afternoon, while they watched the children building a castle with colorful blocks on the living room floor. "Since my wife passed, she had become a silent, distant child." The single mom felt her heart clench as she realized the genuine pain in his voice. Behind all that wealth and power, there was a lost man, struggling to be a father alone in a world that offered everything except what really mattered. "Children feel when they are truly loved," she replied softly. "It doesn't matter if it's in a mansion or a small apartment." Their eyes met, and for a moment something electric passed between them. She quickly averted her eyes, pretending to arrange the sofa cushions, but she could feel that he continued to watch her. The weeks turned into months, and the visits became routine. He always arrived in the late afternoon when she returned from her last job. Sometimes he brought dinners from expensive restaurants, which she initially refused, but eventually accepted when she realized how happy the children were with the new treats. The sexual tension grew silently between them. In the moments when their hands touched while serving food, when he helped her pick up the toys scattered on the floor, in the lingering looks during the children's games. He began to arrive earlier, offering to help with household chores, something she knew he had never done in his life. "You don't have to do this," she said one night, watching him wash the dishes in her small kitchen. The sleeves of his expensive shirt were rolled up, and there was something surreally attractive about seeing him perform that simple task. "I want to," he replied, without taking his eyes off the plates. "It's been years since I felt so normal, so human." It was impossible to deny the attraction that was growing between them, but she fought against those feelings every day. What future could a cleaning lady have with a man of that social level? It was a cruel fantasy that would only make her suffer in the end. He, in turn, faced constant pressures. His partners questioned his absences from important meetings. His wealthy family looked down on his new habits, and the society pages began to speculate about the whereabouts of the city's most eligible bachelor. "Where have you been disappearing to?" his main partner asked during a tense meeting. "We have important business pending, and you always seem to have your head somewhere else." The millionaire brushed it off, but he knew he couldn't maintain that situation indefinitely. Two completely opposite realities collided in his life, and he would have to choose between them soon. The situation reached its limit on a rainy Friday. The single mom had lost one of her jobs, the diner had closed, and the worry was visible on her face. When he arrived and noticed her distress, he offered financial help immediately. "It's just a loan," he insisted. "You can pay me back when you get another job." But she refused again, and this time with more firmness. "I don't want to get used to comforts that aren't mine," she said, wiping away tears of frustration. "If I accept your help today, how will I survive when you get tired of playing at being ordinary and go back to your world?" The words cut deep, because both knew there was truth in them. The words echoed in the small apartment like a direct hit. The businessman stood still, his face pale, processing the accusation he had just heard. She had touched on the most sensitive point of his fears, the possibility that all this was just a temporary whim, an escape from his gilded reality. "Do you really think this is a game to me?" he asked, his voice low but full of emotion. "Do you think I would leave my business aside, face the criticism of my entire family and social circle for fun?" The single mom stepped away, hugging her own body as if trying to protect herself. "I don't know what to think. You appeared in my life like a hurricane, changed our entire routine, and now you offer easy solutions to problems that I've always solved on my own." The silence that followed was broken by the voice of the girl, who appeared at the bedroom door with sleepy eyes. "Daddy, are you leaving again?" Both their hearts ached as they heard the innocent question filled with so much fear. The millionaire crouched down, picking up his daughter in his arms. "No, sweetheart, Daddy's not leaving." But as he comforted the child, his eyes met those of the woman, and she could see there a promise that went beyond the words spoken to reassure a frightened little girl. It was a promise for her, too, a silent declaration that made her heart race. In the following weeks, he proved his dedication in ways she never imagined he would be capable of. He cancelled important business trips so as not to miss the boy's birthday. He arrived every day at the same time, regardless of the chaos in his company. He learned to change diapers when her son got sick, held her hair while she vomited from a virus, slept on the cramped sofa to be close when the children had nightmares. The physical proximity became almost unbearable. One night, when the children finally fell asleep after hours of crying because of the fever, they found themselves alone in the dark living room, only the light from the kitchen gently illuminating the room. She was exhausted, leaning against the wall, and he approached slowly. "You need to rest," he murmured, raising his hand to brush a strand of hair from her face. "I can't," she sighed. "If I relax for a second, everything could fall apart. Then let me help you hold the pieces," he said, his fingers tracing delicately the line of her face. For a moment, she allowed herself to melt into that touch, closing her eyes and feeling the protection that emanated from him. But then she stepped away, because she knew that proximity was becoming dangerous for her heart. The external pressures intensified dramatically. His family organized a dinner to introduce potential wives from his social circle, elegant and educated women who understood the rules of the world in which he lived. When he refused to participate, the family matriarch decided to appear in his office in person. "Have you lost your mind?" the aristocratic woman thundered, her eyes flashing with indignation. "I heard from the gossip columnists that you're frequenting the suburbs. What kind of influence are those people exerting on you and on my granddaughter?" The confrontation was violent. For the first time in his life, he openly confronted his family, defending not only his feelings, but the dignity of the woman he was falling in love with. The consequences were immediate. They threatened to cut family ties, withdraw investments from his businesses, and even question his ability to raise his own daughter. At the same time, the single mom's life was also being affected. The neighbors began to talk about the luxury car that appeared every day, creating malicious speculation about the nature of that relationship. One of them went so far as to suggest that she was selling herself, using the children as a pretext. "Aren't you ashamed?" whispered the oldest woman in the building one afternoon when they crossed paths on the stairs. "A mother getting involved with a rich married man." "He's not married," she replied, trying to maintain her dignity, but the poisoned words found their target. "Rich widower is even worse. Do you really think he's going to give up everything for a cleaning lady?" That night, when he arrived, as he always did, she was visibly shaken. She told him about the comments, about how she felt exposed and judged. Seeing her pain made him furious in a way he had never experienced. "To hell with the comments," he said, pulling her close. "What matters is what we feel." "But it's not just about us," she replied, tears beginning to flow. "It's about the children, too. They're hearing these things, starting to ask questions." It was in that moment of vulnerability that the worst happened. While he was consoling her, holding her tight against his chest, his briefcase slipped off the sofa, spilling its contents on the floor. Among the scattered documents, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Architectural plans of the building where she lived, stamped with municipal approval for demolition. With trembling hands, she picked up the papers and began to read. Urban Revitalization Project, Luxury Commercial Complex, deadline for eviction of residents. His signature was on all the documents dated months before they met. "What is this?" she asked, her voice coming out as a strangled whisper. He looked at the papers in her hands and paled instantly. "I can explain." "You knew," she said, rising slowly, the papers still shaking in her hands. "From the beginning, you knew you were going to kick us out of here." "The project existed before I met you. I was trying to find a way to..." "To what? To gently prepare me to be homeless?" The tears were now flowing freely down her face. "That's why so many visits, so much interest. You were studying the terrain, weren't you?" "It's not like that," he cried, desperate. "My feelings are real." "Get out," she said, pointing to the door. "Get out of my house before I do something I might regret." He tried to approach, but she recoiled, hugging the documents as if they were evidence of a crime. "Please, let me explain. I understand everything now. You're no different from the other rich men I've met cleaning their offices. They think they can play with the lives of poor people because we're disposable." The children appeared in the living room, frightened by the shouting. The girl ran to her father. The boy clung to his mother's legs. The scene broke the hearts of everyone involved, but her wounded pride spoke louder. "Take your daughter," she said, her voice sharp as glass, "and don't come back. The project can go ahead. As soon as we're out of here, you'll have no reason to pretend you care about us." The 3 months that followed were the darkest in both their lives. The single mom closed herself off in her routine of work and caring for her son. But the apartment seemed haunted by the absence of the girl and the man who had brought an unexpected light into their lives. The boy cried every night asking for his little friend, and she no longer knew what to answer. Her own tears always came after he fell asleep, when she could allow herself to lament the loss of what could have been. The millionaire, in turn, immersed himself in work as a form of escape. But nothing could erase the memory of those hurt eyes that had driven him out of the only place where he had felt truly happy. His daughter withered day after day, constantly asking for the woman who had become a second mother and the boy she considered her brother. The most expensive nannies in the city couldn't get a smile out of her. The company faced turbulent times. The urban revitalization project, which had previously seemed like a guaranteed source of profits, had now turned into a curse that he could no longer bear. Each meeting about the demolition schedule was a torture, each municipal approval a stab in his heart. The partners pressed for the start of construction. The investors questioned the delays, but he always found an excuse to postpone it. Single mom finds abandoned girl at bus stop in winter. But she was the daughter of a billionaire, and upon discovery, she does something that shocks everyone. "You are deliberately sabotaging this project," accused his main partner during a particularly tense meeting. "We've already lost 2 major contracts because of these inexplicable delays. Maybe we should reconsider the entire project," he suggested, avoiding direct eye contact with the other executives around the table. "Reconsider," exploded another partner. "We've already invested millions in approvals, feasibility studies, marketing. Have you completely lost your mind?" The truth was, yes, he had lost his mind. Lost it to a woman who had shown him that there was more to life than profit spreadsheets and accumulated wealth. A woman who had made him feel human again, who had taught him that true wealth lay in the simple shared moments, in the laughter of children, in the warmth of a sincere embrace. It was on a rainy Monday that he made the riskiest decision of his career. He arrived at the office determined, called an emergency meeting, and stunned all the partners with his announcement. "The urban revitalization project is cancelled," he declared, his voice echoing in the silent room. The chaos that followed was deafening. Shouts of indignation, threats of lawsuits, questions about his sanity. But he remained firm, even knowing that this decision would cost millions and put his position in the company at risk. "You can't do this unilaterally," bellowed the majority shareholder. "We have signed contracts, commitments to investors." "I can and I will," he replied with a calmness he didn't feel. "I take full responsibility for the financial losses. I'll cover the damages with my personal assets if necessary." The room exploded into heated discussions about liquidity, cash flow, and compromised dividends. He listened to everything in silence, mentally calculating how many of his investments, how many of his stock and fund holdings he would have to liquidate to honor that promise. His fortune, built over years of successful business deals, would be severely shaken, but none of that mattered anymore. In the following days, he worked tirelessly to unwind contracts, negotiate settlements, and find ways to minimize the damage for all parties involved. He sold part of his stock on Wall Street, liquidated investments in Bitcoin that he held as a reserve, and even considered divesting some of his most valuable assets. The important thing was to secure enough resources to compensate for the losses and still have something special to offer. 3 weeks later, he achieved what seemed impossible, not only cancelling the project but also officially acquiring the entire building where she lived. He worked with specialized lawyers to legally transfer the property to all the residents, turning tenants into owners of their apartments. Each family would receive the deed to their unit, free of any liens or debt. With the envelope containing all the documents in his hands, he headed to her apartment on a Friday afternoon. His footsteps echoed on the familiar staircase, but now his heart beat with a mixture of hope and terror. He didn't know if she would receive him, if she would agree to listen to his explanations, if he could forgive the pain he had caused. When he rang the doorbell, he heard hurried footsteps on the other side of the door. She opened it cautiously, and upon seeing him, her expression hardened immediately. "What do you want here?" she asked, keeping the door only partially open. "I need to talk to you," he said, extending the envelope. "It's about the building. If you've come to deliver the eviction notice, you can leave it because I'm already looking for another place," she replied bitterly. "It's not an eviction," he murmured. "It's a deed. Yours." She stared at him suspiciously, but something in his expression made her open the door completely. She took the envelope with hesitant hands and began to read the documents. Her eyes widened progressively as she understood what was written. "This can't be right," she whispered. "It says here that I own the apartment. You and all the other residents," he confirmed. "The project has been cancelled. Forever." Tears began to stream down her face, but there was still suspicion in her eyes. "Why? What do you want in return?" "Nothing," he replied, his voice choked with emotion. "I just want you to believe that my feelings for you are real, that it was never about the project or about manipulation. It was about love from the first day." She let herself slide down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, still holding the documents. "You lost money on this, didn't you?" "I lost a lot," he admitted, crouching next to her. "But I gained the chance to prove that you are worth more than all my fortune." It was then that they heard small footsteps running down the hallway. The boy appeared at the door, saw the man, and shouted with joy before throwing himself into his arms. Seconds later, the girl came running from the staircase where she had been playing, and the reunion was complete. "You're back!" cried the boy, hugging him tightly. "I missed you," confessed the girl, clinging to the woman who had cared for her so tenderly. Seeing the children together again, the genuine happiness plastered on their faces, the single mum felt the last barriers of her heart melt away. She looked at the man who had sacrificed his wealth for love and realized that he was different. There was a lightness in his eyes that hadn't existed before, a peace that only comes from someone who has finally found what really matters. "How are we going to make this work?" she asked, still afraid to believe that this happy ending was possible. "One day at a time," he replied, extending his hand to help her up. "Building a life together, respecting our differences, learning from each other." 6 months later, they were married in a simple ceremony in the backyard of the building, surrounded by the neighbors who had initially criticized the relationship, but now blessed them with sincerity. The children carried the rings, radiant for finally having the complete family they had always wanted. She wore a simple but elegant dress. He exchanged the impeccable suit for more casual clothes that matched the new man he had become. Life didn't magically become easier. He still faced challenges in rebuilding his company after the financial losses, but now he had a real reason to fight. She continued working, not out of extreme necessity, but out of pride and independence, something he learned to respect and admire. Together, they created a routine that mixed the best of both worlds, moments of everyday simplicity interspersed with small luxuries that he insisted on providing for the family. The children grew up like true siblings, united by a bond that transcended blood or circumstances. And every night, when the four of them gathered in the living room of the apartment that was now officially theirs, the single mum who had found the most unlikely love looked around and knew that she had discovered the true wealth, a family built on love, respect, and mutual sacrifice. If you liked this wonderful story, please comment giving a score from 0 to 10. Your opinion is very important, and if you love beautiful stories, subscribe to my channel. I promise to make your day better with my videos.